I stood in my own living room while my son Brandon announced he had registered my house in his name and I needed to find somewhere else to live. His wife, Stephanie, smirked beside him. They had already packed some of my belongings in boxes. Brandon waved legal-looking papers in my face, saying the house was now legally his and I had 30 days to vacate. But I smiled calmly, reached into my purse, and pulled out my own documents. "Funny," I said quietly, "because I annulled that contract yesterday. This house is still mine." 3 months before that confrontation, Brandon and Stephanie had moved into my home temporarily. They claimed their apartment had serious mold issues that needed professional remediation. The landlord was being difficult, they said, and they needed just a few weeks while things got sorted out. As a mother, how could I say no? Brandon was my only child, and I had always been generous with him, perhaps too generous. I welcomed them with open arms. I cooked their favorite meals, did their laundry, made sure they had everything they needed. At 67 years old, I was a retired school teacher living alone in the 4-bedroom house my late husband Richard and I had built together 30 years ago. Richard had been gone for 5 years, and the house often felt too big, too quiet. Having Brandon and Stephanie there brought life back into these walls, or so I thought. The first 2 weeks were pleasant enough. We ate dinners together. Stephanie helped with dishes occasionally. Brandon mowed the lawn one Saturday, which touched my heart. I thought maybe this time together would bring us closer. Maybe Stephanie and I would finally bond the way I had always hoped. She called me Mom sometimes, which made me feel warm inside. But then I started noticing small changes. Brandon spent unusual amounts of time in my home office, the small room at the back of the house where Richard used to pay bills and where I kept all my important paperwork. One afternoon, I walked in to find Brandon going through my filing cabinet, papers spread across the desk. "Oh, Mom," he said, looking startled. "I am just helping organize your paperwork. This filing system is really confusing. You should let me digitize everything for you." I thanked him but felt uneasy. Something in his tone did not ring true. That evening, after they had gone to bed, I checked the filing cabinet. Several important documents were missing: the house deed, property tax records from the past 3 years, a copy of Richard's will. My hands trembled as I searched through every drawer, hoping I had simply misplaced them. But I knew better. I had always been meticulous with important papers. Richard used to joke that I organized things better than the public library. I did not confront Brandon immediately. Instead, I thought carefully about what to do. The next morning, I drove to a local electronics store and purchased a small security camera, the kind people use for home security. The young man at the counter showed me how to set it up on my phone so I could watch the footage remotely. I felt slightly guilty, spying on my own son, but my instincts told me something was very wrong. I installed the camera in my office that afternoon, hiding it behind a row of books on the shelf where it had a clear view of the desk and filing cabinet. Then I waited. Within 3 days, the camera caught everything. I watched from my bedroom as Brandon entered my office when he thought I was out grocery shopping. He photographed documents with his phone. He made phone calls about transferring property. I saw him meet with Stephanie in hushed conversations, both of them huddled over papers spread on my desk. In one clip, I heard Stephanie say, "Your mom is so trusting. This is going to be easier than we thought." My heart shattered into pieces watching that footage. This was my son, the baby boy I had nursed, the child I had read bedtime stories to, the teenager I had stayed up late helping with homework, the young man I had been so proud to see graduate college. How had he become this person who could steal from his own mother? I called my longtime friend Helen, who had been my colleague when I taught 3rd grade. Through tears, I explained everything. Helen recommended a lawyer named Patricia Thornton, someone she knew through her book club who specialized in elder law and family disputes. I made an appointment for the next day. Patricia Thornton was a sharp woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She reviewed the camera footage carefully, making notes. Then she asked to see all my financial documents, everything I could gather. Together, we started pulling threads that unraveled into something far worse than I had imagined. Patricia helped me pull my credit report. What we found made my stomach drop. Brandon had opened several credit cards in my name over the past 6 months. The total debt was $23,000. Charges for expensive electronics, luxury clothing, restaurant meals I had never eaten. But that was not the worst of it. Patricia made some phone calls to contacts she had at various financial institutions. Within 2 days, she uncovered something that made me feel physically ill. Brandon had taken out a home equity loan against my house for $75,000. My house, the home Richard and I had worked so hard to pay off completely, the home where I had planned to live out my remaining years in peace. Brandon had borrowed against it without my knowledge, and the money had gone directly into an account he shared with Stephanie. "How is this possible?" I asked Patricia, my voice barely above a whisper. "How could he do this without my signature?" Patricia's face was grim. "That is what we need to find out. Either he forged your signature, or he somehow obtained legal authority to act on your behalf. We will get to the bottom of this, Alexandra. I promise you." Over the next week, Patricia investigated thoroughly. What she discovered was even more disturbing than the theft itself. The conspiracy went deeper than just my son's greed. Patricia called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice tight with anger. "Alexandra, you need to come to my office right away. I have found something." I drove there with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. In her office, Patricia had documents spread across her conference table like pieces of a terrible puzzle. "Stephanie's brother works at County Title Services," she said. "His name is Derek Walsh. He is the one who processed the paperwork that added Brandon's name to your property deed, then transferred it to sole ownership under Brandon's name." I stared at the documents, not wanting to believe what I was seeing. But there it was. Official paperwork with stamps and signatures, making it look like I had willingly signed over my house to my son. Patricia continued. "The home equity loan money, all $75,000, went directly into a joint account. Brandon and Stephanie opened 3 months ago. I have been tracking their spending. They have already gone through most of it." "What did they buy?" I heard myself ask. "A new luxury truck, a vacation to Hawaii, designer furniture that is currently sitting in a storage unit they rented, expensive dinners, shopping sprees." She paused. "They spent your money like it was nothing, Alexandra." I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt. Patricia poured me a glass of water and made me sit down. "How long have they been planning this?" I asked. Patricia pulled out more papers. "Based on what I have found, at least a year, maybe longer. Brandon has been laying groundwork, positioning himself, waiting for the right moment." "Do you remember signing anything unusual in the past year? Any documents he said were for taxes or estate planning?" I thought back, my mind racing through memories. Then it hit me. 6 months ago, there had been a family dinner. Brandon had invited me to a nice restaurant. Stephanie had been there, along with some of her family members I did not know well. At the end of the meal, Brandon had slid some papers across the table. "Mom," he had said, "I have been talking to a financial planner. These documents will help with tax purposes. It is just routine paperwork to make things easier down the line. Can you sign here?" I had been happy, warmed by the wine and good food, pleased that Brandon was thinking about financial responsibility. I signed where he pointed, barely glancing at the pages. Stephanie's family members had smiled and nodded, like everything was perfectly normal. "Oh God," I whispered to Patricia. "I signed something at dinner. He said it was for taxes." Patricia's expression told me everything. "That was likely a power of attorney document, Alexandra. With that, he could legally act on your behalf." The entire dinner was probably staged. Stephanie's family members were there as witnesses to your signature. They have been planning this for a very long time. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. This was not some impulsive decision. This was calculated, methodical. My son had looked me in the eyes and lied, all while planning to steal everything Richard and I had worked for. But Patricia was not done revealing the depths of this conspiracy. She pulled out another file. "Derek Walsh, Stephanie's brother, has a criminal record, fraud charges from 7 years ago in Michigan. He served 18 months in prison for a similar scheme involving falsified property documents. My head was spinning. So this is what they do. They target people? Patricia nodded grimly. I contacted a colleague in Michigan. She did some digging. 4 years ago, Brandon was involved in another case. His ex-wife's elderly mother signed over her condominium to Brandon, supposedly for estate planning purposes. 6 months later, she was living in a nursing home, and Brandon had sold the property. That case was settled quietly out of court with a non-disclosure agreement, which is why it did not show up in public records. I could barely breathe. You are telling me my son has done this before? Yes. And I believe Stephanie is the one who taught him how. Her family has connections in real estate and title services. Derek is not the only one involved. I found email exchanges between Brandon and Stephanie. She pulled out printed emails, and I forced myself to read them. The old lady is so trusting. One email from Stephanie said, "This will be even easier than Michigan. Your mom does not suspect a thing." Another email from Brandon. "Once we get her out, we can renovate and flip it for at least $400,000. She is too stupid to see it coming." I had to stop reading. Tears blurred my vision. Patricia gently took the papers from my shaking hands. "I am so sorry, Alexandra. I know this is devastating. But we have evidence now. Strong evidence. We can fight this." But even as Patricia explained our legal strategy, she delivered more bad news. Brandon has already initiated eviction proceedings based on the fraudulent ownership documents. You have an eviction hearing scheduled in 3 weeks. Even though the documents are fake, it will take time to prove that in court. He is moving fast, trying to force you out before we can untangle everything legally. Can he really evict me from my own home? I asked, my voice breaking. He can try. And if we are not prepared, a judge who only sees what appears to be legal paperwork might rule in his favor, at least temporarily. We need to move faster than he is moving. I am filing emergency motions today to void the power of attorney and all subsequent transactions. I am also filing criminal complaints against Brandon, Stephanie, and Derek for fraud, forgery, identity theft, and elderly abuse. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my bed, the bed I had shared with Richard, and stared at the ceiling. Down the hall, I could hear Brandon and Stephanie laughing about something. The sound made me feel sick. How could they laugh? How could they sleep peacefully while destroying me? But beneath my heartbreak, something else was growing. Anger. Determination. Richard had always said I was stronger than I gave myself credit for. I thought of all the years I had taught school, dealing with difficult parents, challenging situations, never backing down when I knew I was right. I had raised a child, nursed a dying husband, survived loss and loneliness. I was not going to let my own son take everything from me without a fight. I made a decision. For the next few days, I would let Brandon believe his plan was working. Patricia agreed this was smart. Give them enough rope to hang themselves, she said. So I acted defeated. I started packing a few boxes, making it look like I was preparing to leave. I moved slowly through the house, sighing often, looking sad. Brandon noticed and smiled, actually smiled, as if my pain pleased him. "You will be happier somewhere smaller, Mom," he said one morning over coffee. "This house is too much for you to maintain anyway. We are really doing you a favor." I nodded weakly, not trusting myself to speak. If I opened my mouth, I might scream. Brandon became more cocky as the days passed. He started saying things like, "I am finally the man of this house. And you had your turn, Mom. Time to pass it on to the next generation." Stephanie brought interior designers to the house while I was supposedly home, though they pretended not to care that I could hear them. They walked through rooms discussing renovation plans, talking about my home like I was already gone. "We will tear out this whole wall," one designer said, gesturing at the wall between the kitchen and dining room. The wall where Richard had hung family photos spanning 3 decades. "And this master bedroom," Stephanie said, walking into my bedroom without knocking, "needs to become a home theater. We want a massive screen, surround sound, the works." The cruelty took my breath away. But what truly pushed me from heartbreak to cold determination was when they walked into the backyard. I watched from the kitchen window as Stephanie pointed at Richard's garden, the space where I had scattered some of his ashes among the roses he had planted. "We will tear all this out," she told the designer. "Put in a swimming pool, a big one with a hot tub attached." I gripped the edge of the counter so hard I thought it might crack, but I kept my face neutral. I continued gathering evidence. Patricia had given me a small recording device, and I documented every cruel comment, every callous conversation. One night, Brandon brought his friend Marcus over. They sat in the living room drinking beer, celebrating what Brandon called the new house. I stayed in my room with the door cracked, the recording device running. "Do you feel bad at all, man?" Marcus asked. "I mean, that is your mom," Brandon laughed. The sound chilled me to my core. "She has got retirement money and Social Security. She will be fine in some old folks' home. This house is wasted on her. She just sits here alone all day. At least we will actually use the space." That recording would become crucial evidence later. But in that moment, listening to those words from my son, I felt something inside me harden into steel. The next day, I received a formal eviction notice, slipped under my bedroom door like I was a tenant who had not paid rent. Brandon was accelerating his timeline. He wanted me out within 2 weeks now, not the original 30 days. Patricia called with more news, her voice urgent. "Alexandra, I just found out that Stephanie is pregnant. 2 months along. She has been telling people they are moving into their family home to prepare for the baby. My future grandchild, a baby I would probably never know, born to parents who had stolen from me." The thought broke something in me that had still been holding on to hope. Patricia continued. "There is more. Brandon has been telling your extended family members that you have dementia. He has been saying you are incompetent and that he is taking over your care. He claims the house transfer is for your protection, that you are no longer capable of managing your own affairs." Several of my relatives had believed him. My cousin in Florida had called, gently suggesting I should accept help gracefully. My niece in California had sent a sympathy card, as if I were ill. Brandon had poisoned them against me before I even knew to defend myself. Then my sister Margaret called from Arizona. "Alexandra," she said, her voice confused and worried. "I have been hearing strange things. Brandon called me last week saying you are having memory problems, but you sounded fine when we talked last month. What is going on?" I broke down crying and told Margaret everything. She was horrified. She offered to come immediately, to help me fight. Just hearing her support gave me strength. Meanwhile, Patricia was working urgently. She subpoenaed my friend Helen, who had been at that dinner 6 months ago where I signed the power of attorney. Helen provided a sworn statement describing how confused I had been about the documents. Alexandra asked me afterward what she had just signed. Helen's statement read, "She said Brandon told her it was tax paperwork, but she did not understand it." I remember her seeming uncertain, but Brandon was very reassuring. He told her not to worry about it, that he had everything under control. She trusted him completely. Patricia also gathered my medical records. My doctor, who I had seen just 2 months earlier for my annual checkup, provided a letter confirming I had no cognitive impairment whatsoever. Dr. Sarah Chen wrote, "I have evaluated Alexandra Thompson twice in the past year for routine care. She is mentally sharp, articulate, demonstrates excellent memory and reasoning skills. There are absolutely no signs of dementia, confusion, or any cognitive decline. She is fully competent to manage her own affairs." Armed with all this evidence, Patricia filed an emergency motion to void the power of attorney and all subsequent transactions. She filed criminal complaints against Brandon, Stephanie, and Derek for fraud, forgery, identity theft, and elderly abuse. I moved money from my compromised accounts into a new secure account at a different bank. I changed all my passwords, all my security questions. I put fraud alerts on my credit and froze my credit reports so Brandon could not open any more accounts in my name. Then came the day of confrontation. Brandon served me with the formal eviction papers, expecting me to sign them, expecting me to crumble and accept defeat. Instead, I handed him a folder. He opened it, confusion crossing his face. Then the color drained from his cheeks. Inside were copies of the criminal complaints, the lawsuit Patricia had filed, and a restraining order preventing him from disposing of any assets or contacting me further, except through attorneys. "What is this?" he stammered, but his voice had lost all its confidence. "Those are the consequences of stealing from your mother," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I know everything, Brandon. The fake power of attorney, the fraudulent property transfer, Derek's involvement at the title company, the home equity loan, the credit cards. All of it. You cannot do this," he said. But his eyes showed panic. "I have legal authority. I am protecting you. You had authority obtained through lies and manipulation. And you are not protecting me. You are robbing me." Stephanie rushed into the room, saw the paperwork in Brandon's hands, and immediately pulled out her phone to make a call. Probably to Derek, probably to a lawyer. But it was too late for them. A knock at the door interrupted the chaos. I opened it to find a sheriff's deputy standing there. The deputy had come to serve Brandon and Stephanie with restraining orders. Patricia had arranged everything perfectly. The orders prevented them from disposing of any assets, from leaving the state, and most importantly, from having any contact with me, except through legal representation. Additionally, the deputy informed them they were both under investigation for elder fraud and must surrender their passports immediately. Derek had been arrested at his workplace that morning. The whole conspiracy was collapsing in real time, right there in my living room. "I need to see a lawyer," Brandon said, his voice shaking. "This is insane. Mom, you are making a huge mistake." "The only mistake I made was trusting you," I replied. The deputy explained that Brandon and Stephanie had to vacate my home immediately. They could take only their personal clothing and essential items. Everything purchased with stolen money had to remain. The luxury truck outside was going to be impounded as evidence. Police would escort them while they packed. Stephanie's face contorted with rage. She started screaming at me, her mask of sweetness completely gone. "You selfish old witch," she shrieked. "You do not deserve this house. You are just going to die here alone. We would have actually used it. We would have made it beautiful. You are nothing but a useless old woman taking up space." The officers witnessed every word. So did 3 of my neighbors who had come outside, drawn by the commotion. Stephanie's outburst destroyed any sympathy anyone might have had for them. Here was the real person behind the fake smiles and calls of Mom. Brandon tried to calm her down, but she turned on him too. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You said she was too weak to fight back. You said she was too trusting. You promised me this would work." The officers escorted them upstairs to pack their belongings. I sat in the kitchen with Margaret, who had arrived the day before. She held my hand while we listened to Brandon and Stephanie arguing upstairs, their voices carrying through the vents. "How much did you tell your mother?" Stephanie demanded. "Nothing. She does not know anything. Well, Derek is in jail, so obviously somebody knows everything. Your mother is smarter than you thought. We are ruined. Ruined." An hour later, they left. The officers supervised as they loaded a few suitcases into Stephanie's small sedan. The luxury truck was already on a tow truck, being taken as evidence. Brandon looked back at the house once, his expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been regret. Then they drove away. The silence that followed felt sacred. Margaret made us tea, and we sat together in the kitchen that had witnessed so much pain over the past weeks. Over the next several days, the full extent of their scheme became public. A local news station picked up the story after seeing the police reports. The headline read, "Local woman's son charged in elaborate elder fraud scheme." The reporter interviewed me, and I told my story. Patricia advised me to speak publicly, saying it would help pressure the prosecutors and might encourage other victims to come forward. The community response was overwhelming. Former students reached out, dozens of them, saying they remembered me and offering support. Neighbors brought casseroles and flowers. The church I attended, where Richard and I had been members for 28 years, organized a prayer circle. People I barely knew sent cards telling me how brave I was. Brandon and Stephanie's friends abandoned them. Their social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Stephanie deleted hers entirely. Brandon made his private, but not before people screenshot his posts about the new house, the renovations he had planned, the future he had imagined in my home. Stephanie's family tried to distance themselves from the scandal, but Derek's involvement made that impossible. The title company where Derek worked immediately suspended him pending investigation. When they audited his work files, they discovered he had helped process fraudulent documents for at least 3 other clients over the past 2 years. What started as my case exposed a much broader fraud ring. Derek was facing federal charges now, not just state charges. He was looking at serious prison time. Brandon and Stephanie were forced to move in with Stephanie's parents, who were reportedly furious about the entire situation. The expensive furniture they bought with my money was seized by authorities. Credit card companies froze their accounts and demanded immediate payment for the $23,000 in fraudulent charges. The house equity loan was declared void, but the $75,000 they spent had to be returned. They faced bankruptcy on top of criminal charges. Patricia obtained a court order freezing all their remaining assets. Every bank account, every investment, everything was locked down. They could not sell anything. They could not transfer money. They were trapped. Brandon tried to reach out to me multiple times despite the restraining order. First came angry voicemail messages. "You are destroying my life. How can you do this to your own son? Think about your grandchild." Then the messages turned desperate and pleading. "Mom, please. I made a mistake. You are going to send me to prison. Stephanie and I will lose everything. Think of the baby. Your grandchild will grow up with a father in jail. Please drop the charges. Please." I did not respond to any of them. Patricia advised me not to, and besides, I had nothing to say to him. Each message was forwarded to the prosecutors as evidence of his continued attempts to manipulate me. Margaret stayed with me through all of it. In the evenings, we went through old photo albums together, baby pictures of Brandon, his first day of school, his high school graduation, family vacations to national parks, holidays around the table, a whole life captured in photographs. I cried looking at those pictures, grieving not just the betrayal but the loss of who I thought my son was, or maybe grieving the loss of my own illusions. Maybe he had always had this capacity for cruelty, and I had just refused to see it. Margaret reminded me of times growing up when Brandon had shown selfish tendencies, small things I had dismissed as normal childhood behavior. The way he threw tantrums if he did not get his way, how he blamed others when things went wrong, the time he stole money from my purse in high school and lied about it until I found the evidence. Richard had wanted to punish him more severely, but I had defended him. "Boys make mistakes," I had said. "He will learn." But he had not learned. He had just gotten better at hiding it. The week after Brandon and Stephanie were forced out, a strange thing happened. I started to feel lighter. The house, which had felt invaded and violated, began to feel like mine again. I opened windows, letting in fresh air. I cleaned their room top to bottom, washing away any trace of their presence. Margaret helped me rearrange furniture, putting things back the way Richard and I had kept them. But the legal process was just beginning. Patricia explained that while we had strong evidence, the court system moved slowly. Criminal charges would take months to proceed. The civil case to recover money could take even longer. Meanwhile, Brandon and Stephanie tried one final manipulation. On a Sunday morning, they showed up at my church. I had been attending that church for 3 decades, since before Brandon was born. Father Matthews had baptized Brandon, had presided at Richard's funeral. When I walked in that morning with Margaret, I saw them sitting in a pew near the back. Stephanie was crying loudly, making sure people noticed. Brandon had his head bowed, the picture of remorse. He had known Richard well, had counseled us through difficult times, had held my hand at Richard's deathbed. "Brandon," Father Matthews said, his voice carrying across the room. Other conversations stopped. People turned to listen. "I heard you have been telling people your mother is unwell and that you are helping her." Brandon nodded eagerly. "Yes, Father. She needs family support right now, but her lawyer has convinced her we are trying to hurt her." It is all a misunderstanding. Father Matthews studied him for a long moment. Then he asked, very simply, "Did you steal from your mother?" The room went silent. Brandon's face cycled through several expressions, trying to find the right response. "I did not steal. I was helping manage her finances. She signed paperwork giving me authority." Father Matthews asked again, more firmly, "I have known Alexandra Thompson for over 30 years. She is a woman of integrity, kindness, and strength. She taught our children. She volunteered countless hours. When her husband Richard was dying, she cared for him with devotion. She is not confused or incompetent. She is a victim of a crime, committed by her own son. I stand with her completely." The congregation's energy shifted in that moment. People came to me, hugging me, apologizing for doubting. Mrs. Rodriguez had tears in her eyes. "I had no idea, Alexandra. I am so sorry. If you had told me what Brandon did, I never would have listened to him. Brandon fled the church. Stephanie ahead of him. I never saw him in that church again." In the following weeks, more revelations came to light. The woman from Colorado, the elderly mother of Brandon's ex-wife, came forward after seeing news coverage of my case. Her name was Dorothy, and she called Patricia's office. She had signed a non-disclosure agreement, but her lawyer said the new criminal charges voided it. Dorothy told her story. Brandon had convinced her to sign over her condominium for tax purposes. Within 6 months, he had sold it and kept all the money. Dorothy ended up moving into a nursing home, using up her savings to pay for care. She had been too ashamed to tell her daughter what happened until it was too late. The settlement she got was a fraction of what she had lost, and the non-disclosure agreement had prevented her from warning others. She cried on the phone with Patricia. "I should have spoken up. If I had, maybe Alexandra would not have gone through this. I was so embarrassed. I felt like such a fool." Patricia assured her she was not a fool. She was a victim. Together with Dorothy and her lawyer, they joined forces. A class action lawsuit was prepared against Brandon and Stephanie for a pattern of elder fraud. Derek's case moved quickly. Federal prosecutors had a strong case with clear evidence of his involvement in multiple fraud schemes. He took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Brandon and Stephanie in exchange for a reduced sentence. He got 6 years in federal prison. With Derek cooperating, the case against Brandon and Stephanie became ironclad. They both faced multiple felony charges across 2 states, Colorado and my home state. Their lawyers advised them to take plea deals. I had to decide whether to accept the plea deals or push for trial. Patricia explained that a trial could take years and would be emotionally exhausting. The plea deals included prison time, full restitution, and permanent criminal records. I thought of Dorothy in Colorado, living in a nursing home, her savings gone. I thought of the other victims Derek had defrauded. I thought of my own sleepless nights, the feeling of violation, the betrayal that had cut so deep. Justice needed to be served, not just for me but for everyone they had hurt. I accepted the plea deals on one condition: that Brandon and Stephanie both allocate in open court, admitting exactly what they did. I wanted it on the record. I wanted them to say the words aloud. The courtroom was packed on the day of sentencing. Dorothy came from Colorado. Former students of mine filled several rows, showing support. Margaret sat beside me, holding my hand. Patricia sat on my other side, her briefcase full of documentation we had gathered over months of investigation. Brandon was brought in first, wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked thin, tired, older than his 34 years. When he saw me, he looked away quickly, shame on his face. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Catherine Morrison, reviewed the case thoroughly. She read excerpts from the evidence, the emails calling me stupid, the recordings of Brandon laughing about putting me in a nursing home, the testimony from Derek about the conspiracy, the impact statements from Dorothy and other victims. Then she asked Brandon to stand and address the court. His voice shook as he spoke. "I stole from my mother. I manipulated her, lied to her, betrayed her trust. I conspired with my wife and others to commit fraud. I did it out of greed. I wanted money and property that was not mine. I convinced myself I deserved it, that I was owed it somehow. But I was wrong, completely wrong. He paused, wiping his eyes. My mother gave me everything growing up. She worked hard to provide for me. She paid for my education. She loved me unconditionally, and I repaid that love by trying to steal her home. I destroyed our relationship. I hurt her in ways I can never repair. I am deeply ashamed. Judge Morrison asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood, my legs unsteady, but my voice clear. Your Honor, I said. The man standing before you is my son. I raised him. I loved him more than my own life. If he had asked me for help, I would have given him anything I could. But he did not ask. He took. He lied. He plotted to throw me out of my home. He showed no remorse until he was caught. I looked directly at Brandon. You did not just steal money. You stole my trust, my peace, my sense of safety. You made me question my own judgment. You isolated me from family by lying about my mental state. You stole my dignity. My voice grew stronger, but you did not break me. I fought back. I refused to be a victim, and I want other people in my situation to know they can fight back too. Elder fraud is a crime. Children who steal from parents are criminals, not misguided kids making mistakes. What you did was calculated and cruel. I sat down. Brandon was crying openly now. Judge Morrison sentenced him to 4 years in prison with possibility of parole after serving 2 years. He was also ordered to pay complete restitution, all stolen money, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages. The total came to $198,000. Stephanie's sentencing came next. She had initially tried to claim she was just following Brandon's lead, that she did not know it was wrong. But the prosecutors had emails proving she had been the driving force behind the scheme. She had researched how to commit the fraud. She had recruited her brother, Derek. Stephanie received 3 years of probation with strict conditions. If she violated any terms, she would serve 5 years in prison. She was also ordered to pay restitution and was prohibited from working in any financial, real estate, or legal field. Her brother Derek was already serving 6 years in federal prison. Stephanie's family had relocated to another state, too ashamed to remain in the community. Her parents issued a public apology, though it felt hollow and insufficient. The title company where Derek worked settled with me for $50,000 to avoid a larger lawsuit. They had failed to catch his fraudulent activities despite multiple red flags. The settlement money helped cover legal expenses. All the fraudulent documents were officially voided. My house was confirmed as solely mine with clear title. My credit was repaired, and all fake accounts were closed and marked as fraud. The damage to my credit score was reversed. Through asset seizure, we recovered about $43,000 from various sources. The luxury truck was sold at auction. The furniture in storage was liquidated. Bank accounts were drained. Every penny we could find went toward restitution. Before Brandon was taken to begin his prison sentence, he asked to speak with me one final time. Patricia advised against it, saying I had no obligation and that it might just be another manipulation. But something in me needed closure. We met in a small conference room at the courthouse, supervised by Patricia and a guard. Brandon sat across from me, handcuffed, his face haggard. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. "I know I do not deserve it." I said nothing, just waited. "I want you to know I understand what I did now. Being in jail, waiting for sentencing, I have had time to think. Really think. I was jealous of you." "Jealous of me?" My voice was sharp. "I lost my husband. I live alone. What could you possibly be jealous of? You seemed content. After Dad died, you seemed okay eventually. You had your friends, your hobbies, your volunteering. You did not need me. I resented that. I wanted you to need me, to depend on me, and I wanted what you had. The house felt like something I deserved, like my inheritance being held hostage. It was never held hostage. It would have been yours when I died. You just could not wait." "I know," his voice broke. "I became someone I do not recognize. Stephanie pushed me at first, but I made the choices. I destroyed us. I destroyed everything. Why did you hate me so much? I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. I did not hate you. I hated myself. You represented everything I was not. You were patient, kind, generous. I was greedy and weak. It was easier to take from you than to become a better person. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I spoke. I loved you more than my own life, Brandon. I would have given you anything if you had just asked. But you wanted to take. You wanted to feel powerful. You wanted to prove I was weak. Now you will have years in prison to think about what you destroyed. I stood to leave. He called after me. Stephanie's baby. Your grandchild. Will you ever? I turned back. That child deserves better than what you both became. I hope parenthood teaches you what I could not. That love is not something you steal. Goodbye, Brandon. I walked out of that room and did not look back. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Stephanie, postmarked from another state. Inside was a check for $800 and a 2-page letter. She wrote that she was leaving Brandon, that she could not raise a child with a convicted felon, that she was moving to her sister's house across the country to start over. The $800 was everything she had left in her personal account. She called it a start on repayment, promising to send more as she could. Her letter continued. I am ashamed of who I became. Watching you fight back, seeing your dignity through all of this, showed me what real strength looks like. My baby deserves a better example than what I have been. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the second chance I have been given. I will pay back every cent, even if it takes my whole life. I did not cash the check. Instead, I put it in a frame and hung it in my office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that even people who do terrible things are still human, still capable of recognizing their wrongs, still capable of change, perhaps. Whether Stephanie truly changed, I would never know. I heard later that she had a daughter, that she was working as a waitress and living quietly. She sent small payments periodically, $50 here, $100 there. Patricia tracked them, applying them to the restitution order. As for Brandon, he sent letters from prison occasionally. I did not read them. Patricia kept them filed in case they were needed for legal purposes, but I asked her not to tell me what they said. Some doors, once closed, need to stay closed. 6 months after the sentencing, I stood in my home office with a paintbrush in my hand. The room where so much betrayal had been planned was being transformed. I painted the walls a soft cream color, hung new curtains in pale blue, and set up an easel by the window. This room became my art studio. I had always loved painting but had set it aside after Richard died, feeling like I had lost my inspiration. Now inspiration flooded back. I painted landscapes from memory, scenes from my years of teaching, portraits of Richard from old photographs. Margaret visited every few weeks, staying for long weekends. We grew closer than we had been in years. She helped me plant new flowers in the garden, and we spent hours talking about everything and nothing. I reconnected with former students through social media. So many of them reached out after hearing my story, sharing memories of my classroom, telling me how I had impacted their lives. Several became regular visitors. A young woman named Emma, who I had taught 20 years earlier, started joining me for coffee every Thursday. She had become a teacher herself, and we talked about education, life, challenges. I started volunteering at the senior center downtown, teaching art classes to other older adults. There, I met people who had experienced their own betrayals, their own losses. We formed a community of survivors, supporting each other. One woman, named Joan, shared that her daughter had stolen her retirement savings. Another man, Harold, had been defrauded by a caregiver. We started a support group, meeting twice a month. I invited Patricia to come speak about protecting oneself legally from elder fraud. The group grew to 15 people, then 20. I became an advocate. Local news stations invited me to speak about warning signs of elder fraud. I gave talks at community centers, churches, senior living facilities. My story resonated with people. Hundreds reached out to say I had helped them recognize similar situations in their own lives or gave them courage to fight back against abusers. Patricia's law firm created a free legal clinic for elder fraud victims, and I volunteered there, offering emotional support to people going through what I had survived. My days became full again, but this time with purpose I had chosen, not obligations I felt trapped by. I woke each morning grateful for my home, my independence, my hard-won peace. In the garden, I expanded Richard's rose beds. I planted new varieties in colors he would have loved, deep reds and soft pinks. I created a memorial space with a stone bench where I could sit and feel close to him. Sometimes I talked to him there, telling him about my day, about the people I had met, about the life I was rebuilding. One afternoon, sitting on that bench with the sun warm on my face, I wrote Richard a letter in the journal I kept for him. "My dearest Richard," I wrote, "I lost our son, but I found myself again. You would be proud of how I fought. You always told me I was stronger than I believed. You were right, and you would tell me, I know, that real love does not come from blood but from choice. The family we build with people who truly care, that is what matters. I have built a new family now, friends who show up, former students who remember, strangers who became friends through shared pain. This family chooses me every day, and I choose them. I am okay. More than okay. I am living again." One day, Patricia called with the news that full restitution had been paid through various sources. Asset seizures, court-ordered payments, settlements. The financial debt was settled. "Does that give you closure?" Patricia asked. I thought about it. The money was never really the point. It was about justice, about refusing to be a victim, about fighting back when someone tries to destroy you. The money being returned is important, but the real victory was refusing to be silent. Patricia's voice was warm. "You have helped 3 other women come forward about similar schemes because of your willingness to speak publicly. Those women are getting their own justice now. That is your real legacy from this." After we hung up, I stood in my garden at sunset, surrounded by flowers I had planted, in the home I had defended, living the life I had reclaimed. I thought about forgiveness. Could I ever forgive Brandon? I did not know. Maybe someday, maybe never. But I realized I needed to forgive myself. I forgave myself for trusting too much, for not seeing warning signs earlier, for believing that being a good mother meant never questioning my son. For the years I had measured my worth through his approval instead of recognizing my own value. I was 67 years old, but I felt reborn. At an age when many people slow down, I was speeding up, teaching classes, making art, helping others, building new friendships. My calendar was full. My heart was healing. The house that Brandon tried to steal became more than a house. It became a symbol of my refusal to be destroyed. Every room held memories of my marriage, my life with Richard, the years of building something meaningful. But it also held new memories now, laughter with friends, art being created, support groups meeting around my dining room table, a life being lived fully. I learned that betrayal does not define you. How you respond to it does. I learned that justice is real, even when it is slow and painful to achieve. I learned that family is not always who shares your blood. Family is who shows up, who believes you, who fights beside you. Most importantly, I learned that I am stronger than I ever knew. At 67, I fought for my life, my home, my dignity, and I won. Not because I was ruthless, but because I refused to let someone else's greed and lies become my truth. To anyone facing betrayal from those they love, I want to say this. You are not weak for trusting. You are not foolish for loving. You are not alone. Fight back. Speak up. Protect yourself. Document everything. Get legal help. Do not let shame silence you. And know that on the other side of this pain is a version of you that is wiser, stronger, and more free than you have ever been. The journey through betrayal is agonizing, but surviving it, overcoming it, that transforms you. You discover capabilities you did not know you had. You find your voice. You reclaim your power. The house is mine. The life is mine. And I am finally, truly home. Now I have a question for you. Have you or someone you know ever experienced betrayal from a family member? How did you find the strength to move forward? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is struggling right now. If this story touched your heart or gave you strength, please consider liking this video. It helps more people find these stories and realize they are not alone. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about real people overcoming real challenges, and please share this video with anyone who might need to hear it. You never know whose life you might change by simply passing along a message of hope and resilience. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. I wish you strength, peace, and the courage to always stand up for yourself. Remember, you are stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and worthy of respect and dignity. Take care of yourselves and each other.